Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm your host, Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. Today, I am pleased to welcome Oren Michels, co-founder and CEO of Barndoor AI, to AI for the C-Suite. Oren brings a unique perspective to enterprise AI, having successfully navigated the early days of another transformative technology that changed how businesses operate. Back in 2006, when most people had never heard of APIs, Oren founded Mashery to help companies manage these critical business connections. He built that company over 7 years and sold it to Intel in 2013 just as mobile apps were exploding and every business needed an API strategy. Today, Oren sees a similar pattern emerging with AI agents in the enterprise. Last November, he co-founded Barndoor AI after recognizing that companies face the same fundamental challenge they did with APIs. How do you safely connect powerful new tech to your critical business systems? Barndoor raised a $13.5 million seed round and has grown to a team of 22, building what Oren calls the control plane for Agentic AI in the enterprise. What makes Oren's perspective particularly valuable is his focus on a problem many execs are just beginning to grapple with. AI agents aren't just tools that provide information, they take actions. And unlike human employees, agents have no conscience, no fear of consequences, and no inherent understanding of business context. Today, we'll explore how middle market companies can harness the productivity benefits of AI agents while maintaining the security and governance necessary to protect their businesses. Oren, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Thanks, Chad. That was a lovely intro.
Thank you. We put a lot of time crafting intros, so
Did you use AI to help you craft that intro?
Just a little bit, yes. Just a little bit. I've got a secret sauce here that's a sprinkle of me, a sprinkle of you, and a sprinkle of something else. So hopefully it comes off all right. So let's dive right in. I mentioned in the intro that you are describing Barndoor as the control plane for Agentic AI, and I would like to have you explain what a control plane is for anybody that's not familiar with that terminology, and why is it that enterprises might need one specifically for AI agents?
Well, when we hire humans, we give them permissions of what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. We say, you can use Salesforce and you can do these things in it. You can use Google Docs and you can do those things in it. And you can see these ones, but you can't see those ones. And agents and any AI, for that matter, that's going to access the same systems that we as humans use need to have that level of governance as well. And it already exists for the humans, but that's not quite good enough. As you mentioned, the agents have a lot more of a blast radius. They can do a lot more, a lot faster than I can. They're not afraid of being fired. And they're like enthusiastic interns. They really want to just take their instructions and go do it no matter what happens. And so just saying that you have an identity system that says that Oren's allowed to have access to these things is not enough if I start to use things that act on my behalf but independently without necessarily my governance and my conscience. So when you think about each of those things needs to have that governance. And there's going to be a lot of those things, right? Right now we've got more AIs than you and I can name in the time we have here. And I just got it off of a call with a very large financial institution where the CIO there says he fully expects each of his employees to have hundreds or perhaps even thousands of agents that they use in their job, and he has 20,000 employees. And so if you want to be able to start managing that, you can either try to go agent by agent, platform by platform, each of which presents its own interface or admin tools to try to make that happen, or you can say, no, we're just going to put something in between that is a gateway. It's a controlling device. And it says, here are all the different things, and we understand what their capabilities are and what their risks are and that sort of thing. Here are all the humans and their roles, and we understand what they do. On the other side, here are all the tools people use. Here's Salesforce and Snowflake and Notion and Google Docs and all those things. And something called a control plane will manage the traffic that goes between them. It will give the administrators the ability to see what these agents are trying to do. So if you say to the Salesforce agent or an agent using Salesforce, go update my opportunities, and it goes to try to delete them instead, well, you'll see that, right? And you'll have rules in place to keep that from happening. And so it manages this across many, many, many agents on one side and many, many, many tools on the other side, with the humans sort of on a third side.
So how is this different from some of the security and access control systems that companies already have in place that give them visibility into network traffic and some level of control?
Yeah, well, network traffic is important. That is one layer, and you think of the network layer models, right? And so network traffic says, and it's important. For instance, we suggest that you tell the MCP servers you're running, or ours if you're using ours, that they can only accept network traffic that comes through us. So that's a particular kind of rule, right? A network traffic rule might say even, and there's authentication things and identity that say, Oren is allowed to use this set of records in Salesforce, and he's allowed to update them. But none at the packet level, you're not going to be able to say, Oren is a low-level sales employee. He's allowed to update opportunities with his agent, but only those that are worth less than $2,000. He's allowed to, as I do, actually, I'm CEO, and with my agents, when I finish a call, I use Claude to update Salesforce about it. And I make it very clear that Claude is allowed to create a new call record, but it's not allowed to modify the ones that are there, and it's not allowed to modify the underlying record or the account, because that's not what I want it to be doing. And although I'm allowed to do those things, I don't want to have to worry about it. So I make sure that when I'm using Claude for this task, it's only allowed to do the things that it should be allowed to do given the context of what it's doing. And that is not, you talk about security systems. Security systems are all designed around, there's these nefarious people outside who are trying to penetrate and get in and steal your stuff. And we have to deal with that. That's an important part of what we do. It's what I sort of call security with a capital S. That is, you have a CISO and they do that. But those folks are not used to saying, here's a perfectly authorized human using a tool they're allowed to use to access a system they're allowed to access, but that tool is doing stupid stuff because it didn't have the context, or it got a bad prompt, or it just interpreted it wrong, or it had a bad day, or whatever reason. And so you want to be able to be sure that this kind of management is also in place. And that's not the role of traditional security.
Okay. So help me understand, because a lot of our listeners are non-technical execs, as many are, right? Yeah. So I'm a CEO.
As I am. I'm a non-technical exec.
Well, and I even just heard you in your prior explanation describe yourself as a low-level sales employee. So
right, exactly. Well, it's certainly my job today. So yes.
So let's say that I'm leading an organization. What is it that your technology is going to do to flag these bad use cases? Because again, the call is coming from inside the house here, essentially. Exactly. So how are they going to determine what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, and how are they going to flag that?
That is set by a combination of people, right? So again, going back to your security person and your CISO, whatever their title is, they understand these outside actors, and there's going to be a series of policies they dictate. But they don't know the ins and outs of Salesforce. They don't know the ins and outs of Google Docs, because that's not their world. And so those policies will be set perhaps by a Salesforce admin or an HR team or whatever, and have to be able to manage by them. So when you say, how does the system know it? Well, the system knows it because we tell it. I mean, we or our customers tell it. But what's more important is to say, how do you go about doing that? And the answer is you do it the same way you would when you have that new intern show up. And you say, okay, I'm going to give you a task, and I'm going to see how you attempt to do that task. And it's going to be a task that you may or may not have all the ability to go do right now, but I want to see how you do that task and what your process is to do it, so I can decide if I can trust you to really do it for real, right? And that's sort of how we give people more and more authority. And with these, it's the same sort of thing. So you have Claude, and you say, okay, Claude, go clean up my opportunities. And then you can look and see how it interprets that and what the specific calls are to Salesforce. At that point in time, you may have shut all that stuff out. You have given it only read access, and it can't actually go do it. It's going to error out, which is fine, because then you can say, okay, it's errored out, but how did it try? When I gave it that instruction, did it try to do the things that were consistent with that task? And if the answer is yes, you start turning those on, and you say, okay, now try it again, and it succeeds, and you begin to get to a place where this set of instructions going to that AI tool using these set of enterprise tools are likely to not cause trouble, and you're willing to bring that on. You also will have, as we talked about, hundreds perhaps of these different agents working. Depending on the context and what that agent's doing, that exact same agent may have different permissions assigned to it. So you may say, well, on the occasion that I'm doing this particular task, I've noticed it's capable of interpreting it correctly, and I'm allowed to have it writing to opportunities. But when it does that thing, sometimes it tries to do things it shouldn't, so I'm cutting it off in that context.
I find the intersection and the overlap between permissions and process for agents absolutely fascinating, because as we are promised the era of true agentic AI, we're promised this idea that agents are going to learn and they're going to be able to take additionally increased actions. And I just wonder, how do we continue to evolve and adapt both the permissions and the process through the type of infrastructure that you're talking about to ensure that we are getting the results that we desire? Does that make sense?
If you could restate it, I'm not sure exactly what you're...
Sure. So we talked to you give a very good answer about how this works, right, from a non-technical perspective. We talked about policy, but we also talked about permissions and what is allowed and what's not allowed. And it sounds as if there's also an overlap there in terms of the documented process that certain agents are going to follow.
Right.
And I wonder, as we unleash more self-evolving agents, how do we continue to ensure that we understand the processes that they're following, as well as adapt and update the permissions based on that changing environment? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that certainly in the current time horizon, we don't understand it, and that's part of the problem, right? We also don't understand humans, by the way, and so
what?
I know it's a thing, right? And so when I have an employee, I would, as much as I would love to, drill into their brain and understand why they think that way. I can't go do that. And I can't really do that with AI agents either, because we really don't understand how the technology works. And so instead, what you do with humans and what you do with agents is you observe how they interact with the world around them. And is that consistent with the task at hand? And are they doing things or attempting to do things that don't make sense? If the low-level sales employee is trying to access records in the payroll team, that's probably an indication that person is doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, and you'll want to shut that down and be aware of it. Mm-hmm. I think that as the agents get more complex and as they interact with each other, you have multi-step agents and agent to agent and all these sorts of things. You will still be in a situation where ultimately the best way to ensure that the right thing is happening is to know what's going in, what's coming out, what's going between the different agents, be aware of those lines of communication, and set your rules there. Because trying to set them within the AIs themselves, at least at this point, is not something that I would necessarily rely on being able to do.
Fair enough. When do you typically find that you're getting the calls to get involved with organizations that are either deploying, experimenting, or thinking about agents? And I know the ideal solution here is, we want to be in upfront before you've even started thinking about this. But when do you typically start to get these calls?
Yeah, it's so, and we're talking about agents, but it's any AI that interacts with it, right? So, is Claude agentic? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I type it, I ask it to do something. Sometimes it acts on my behalf. Sometimes it just gets me information. So, it's any AI that needs to talk to underlying systems. Mm-hmm. Generally today using this protocol called MCP, which we can get into if you want to. But generally speaking, people contact us when the science experiment didn't really yield much in the way of ROI, because everybody was kind of afraid to actually let it do something. And so you had the scientist, maybe you like hooked it up and you said, oh, I can like list all my opportunities. Well, I can do that in Salesforce too. That's not helpful, right? What's helpful is for me to be able to bring in information from multiple different places, and I can at the beginning of the week, I can pull the schedules of all my salespeople. I can bump those up against the opportunities we have open. I can pull in all the Slack chats that we're talking about them, and I can get an overview of what's likely to happen that week and how I can be of assistance and when I should pop in and say hi to these people. And so, it's when they come to us when they generally have some known use case or something they want to do that they think is going to make them money or make them more productive or whatever it is businesses want to do, whatever their goals are, and give them more time at home, whatever it could be. And they're ready to really make this work for reals. But it's scary and complicated, and they see an array of all these different MCP servers out there, but they can't really trust them. They don't know what they are. And they're not. They're sort of worried about what will happen, and they want to be aware and be controlling. So that's one place. The other place we get called in is that we're able to deploy. Our standard deployment is in the cloud. Everybody loves the cloud. But we can also deploy in private clouds and on-prem. So like we have major financial institutions that want to implement these technologies, MCP and other technologies, inside their firewall. And the do-it-yourself versions out there are just not enterprise grade for that, right? So we're able to do that, and that allows us to serve a particularly security conscious class of customer.
You mentioned MCP, and I do want to dive into that because that is absolutely a very hot topic right now. Before we do that, though, I want to jump back in the Wayback Machine here a little bit, and I want to talk about your build of Mashery and your observation about APIs, right? I know that you have said that the AI Agentic Challenge looks like the same movie that you saw back in 06. And you've got wonderful movie posters behind you. So
these are Broadway posters.
Oh, Broadway posters. Oh, okay. I was thinking about the Good Night, Good Luck there that I saw with Clooney.
I was a producer on that on Broadway.
Were you now? Oh, boy. All right. We need to explore that in a separate episode, I think. What are the specific parallels that you're seeing right now? And what were some of the lessons that you learned from the API era that might be relevant today?
Well, so in the API era, and I started Mashery in 2006. Okay, so that was before there was an iPhone and before there was really AWS to any real extent. We were one of their first customers. I had been running business development for the world's second best blog search engine. The world didn't really need the first best one either. But there was some really interesting technology we had that a large company wanted to integrate in their capabilities. And so they came to me, and I was a biz dev guy, and they said, we would like to access your API. And I said, great. So I went to our engineers. I said, we got this big deal. They'll pay us a bunch of money. All we have to do is give them our API. And they're like, well, we don't have one and we can't. And I'm like, well, why not? Well, they gave me all these reasons that boiled down to they didn't want to build the infrastructure around doing it. And I thought, well, this is silly because I can't dev any biz if I can't, make this thing happen. And I started realizing that as the world was sort of moving to these, web services concept, this was going to become really, really important. And so I left my job there and I went to one of the investors who had been an investor in this company. We're having dinner and I was explaining this problem, and he said, well, you should start a company to do that. I said, great, I will. So I did, and that became Mashery. And we began building, and what it was that was, back then, the engineers had the keys to the kingdom. And if you wanted someone to have access to your API, you found a dude who knew where the appliance was and had the password to it and knew how to use terminal and could make something, create something that maybe wouldn't get disrupted, but if someone tried to use it too much, then you were all screwed, right? And that just didn't seem like a way to run a business. And so now what we did at that point was we turned it into a business tool that companies could use. Conveniently, Apple brought the iPhone out in the App Store. Everybody needed a mobile strategy. Mobile apps talk to APIs, and here we were. And so now what we're seeing is we have this AI, and the initial version of what we all think of AI, and businesses at least, is these chat interfaces where the very, very best and brightest uses and most economically viable uses we've come up with for these chat interfaces are coding copilots. Coding copilots are saving people a lot of money and a lot of time. Why? They mimic how coders work. If a coder has code that's not working, they go to a super smart PhD, their CTO, and say, here's all my code, fix it for me. And they do, right? And that is something chat is incredibly good at doing. So once again, the engineers built the tool that they can love. And the rest of us are like, wait, I could use something like that if only. And the if only is, if only it could talk to the stuff I use, if only it could access the systems I can access. And then we have this agentic thing coming along that wants to write to things, which is not really what the role of your typical chat interface was, right? And so now you're saying, okay, there's this thing and it needs access to the real business stuff to go do things and be productive. And just as that large company needed access to my stuff to make me money. And so in that sense, it seems to be, there's a lot of parallels. And in fact, there's the technological challenges, we are a proxy, we are a gateway between this and that. That's essentially what API management is, right? And so, the way I viewed it in terms of the spec of what we're building has an awful lot to do with it. It's extended because it's not merely, there are API management companies and they have AI products, but again, they're based specifically on a key and on access control and don't have the same level of visibility and management because that's not part of API management. So it's the level beyond. The fact that you have access to this call is not sufficient to say that you should be allowed to do it.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you walking me through that because I think the way that you answered that actually does lend itself to us going in a little bit deeper on MCPs now, since you talked about all that connective tissue. So for the folks out there that MCP is just, they've never heard of it before. Let's talk about Model Context Protocol, MCP. What is MCP? Why does it matter?
Yeah, why does it matter? So what I mentioned, I started this company to help people connect their AIs to the systems they use. And conveniently and nicely, the folks at Anthropic last November put out this protocol that purports to make that easy and rational. And what it essentially does, we'll spend a sec on APIs here. Just APIs are essentially how computers talk to computers. So if I want to interact with a particular application, I can do it through their user interface, or a computer over here can sort of bypass that and go straight to it with a conduit that they each understand, called an API, and it has some security on it. So, but an AI isn't a normal computer. It's not just here is my query to the AI or the computer accessing an API has been programmed by programmers who know the rules of that API. And they say, well, if we want it to happen, you send a query in this form and you'll get an answer in that form. And it's a known thing and programmers program that. AIs don't work like that. AIs, like us, they're some sort of ambiguous. They're given something like, how am I going to go about doing this? What tools do I have at my disposal? So MCP is essentially, it is a menu of the various options and things and tools and capabilities that some system somewhere is giving this AI as sort of the universe of toys they can play with to answer that thing, and then also provides it sort of the form that it would need to play with that in terms of how it should make the request and what information it's going to get back. And you might have multiples of these. I could have my AI talking to Salesforce and then interacting with Notion and then sending an email on my behalf and putting it into a PDF and dropping it into Google Drive, right? So each of those things has a group of menu items that you're able to play with. And on a very rudimentary level, often, there's an ability to turn specific ones of these on and off in a fairly, broad way. And then, of course, we provide a much more sophisticated and nuanced way of managing that. But fundamentally, it's saying to the AI in a form the AI can understand, here are the external resources, tools, abilities, data at your disposal that you can use to either answer questions or take the actions that your human is telling you you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. So I think that begs the question then, because we know that the AI tools that are out there, the large language models, the agents upon which they're built, they're statistical and they're probabilistic in nature, right? They're not true thinking machines. So,
correct.
Right. Okay. So I'm an AI agent. Well, I'm not an AI agent. Let's say I'm an AI agent, and I'm calling up the MCP server here, and I'm looking at all the different things there. How am I going to make the determination probabilistically, statistically, about which one of those menu options I need to select to do my task? How does that look?
It's an interesting question, and it also, so I would say that the depths of how AI models function and think is probably beyond the scope of today's podcast. But ultimately, there are things you're going to want to do to influence the AI to choose the right tools, the tools you'd like it to use. So, for instance, or to use them in a certain way. So, for instance, I can interact with Claude, and Claude, like most AIs, count these things called tokens, which are essentially a unit of measure that shows how much data is going in and out of them that they have to deal with. It's a bad definition, but we'll go with it. So if the AI says, I want to pull up my contact Chad Harvey in Salesforce, one way it could do it is it could assume that there's a Chad Harvey contact and say, I want the Chad Harvey contact. Or the easier for the AI way is give me all the contacts, and I'm going to look for contacts that sound like something like Chad Harvey. I'm going to get the contact ID for it, and I'm going to go back and request it specifically by the ID. Well, that second way just burned a bunch of tokens because it looked at the entire thing, right? This is how it usually runs if it's allowed to, right? And so you now have other, there's a layer of sophistication that's being built into this. It's not as important an issue today because many of these AIs aren't charging you for tokens yet, but they will be. Where our more sophisticated customers are like, we need your help managing that as well, right? And so you're not just using the MCP to give it the full menu. You're imagining the waiter in the restaurant. They're giving you the full menu, but they're also saying, but today's special is this one. And if you can use that one, you probably want to, and it's it's a better deal kind of thing. And so.
Okay, I think that is a perfect focal point to go back to something you addressed earlier when you categorized agents as enthusiastic interns, right? And I think if I'm an executive and I'm thinking about deploying agents, that helps me understand the fact that the agents don't necessarily understand the consequences of their actions. So when you're working with organizations and you come across this type of subject matter, how else do you help execs think about deploying agents? And what have you learned that is good counsel for leaders when this topic comes up?
Well, I think it starts with understand which agents are good at what. Using the right tool for the job certainly helps, but it's also to understand what you're expecting them to do and how you're expecting them to do it, so that you can instruct them in a rational way, and experiment with how you instruct them in order to try to get to the most efficient and effective way to get the job done. But you're right. They're not. It's not linear. It's not an easy thing to do, as managing humans is an easy thing to do. And so, I think it's also that the other thing I advise executives to do is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't say, I just saw, Glean, and that's going to be the cool AI. I'm going to use that one, right? It is a cool AI. It's not the only cool AI, right? And so, I was with a group of insurance executives yesterday. And one of them was like, we're we're implementing Writer and it's great, except when it's not, right? And so we encourage people to have a low bar for trying things, and also to realize it's all changing so fast. So we see this with the different models. What ChatGPT is really, really good at today, they bring out a new model and suddenly, Gemini's better at that. Okay, and so understanding when to use which of the arrows in your quiver is a big part of this, and not insisting on sticking with ones just because it's the one you happen to be used to using.
Mm-hmm. Oren, one of the things that's coming across very clearly in our conversation today, for me at least, is that you are very comfortable speaking truth to power. And for our audio-only listeners, there's a poster we referenced earlier on the wall behind you, Good Night, Good Luck, which is all about speaking truth to power.
It is indeed. It's a lovely show.
Yes, it is. And so I'm curious, how well does your message land with CEOs that don't want to hear some of what you're saying right now? Because you've got what I would call a spiky point of view occasionally about certain things, which is probably contrary to a vision that a lot of leaders have in their mind about the way this stuff is going to work.
Well, I think it's the vision. I think the folks that would be more upset with the vision that we have are the ones who want to be the only AI anyone needs, right? And so if you're, software company X, pick a SaaS company, they all have AI agents, and they're like, use my AI agent, it'll do everything you need, because that's what they want, but they won't, right? And so the folks who I think are mostly pushed aside by this are the ones who have to become convinced that their AI has to play well with other people's AIs, and that they're not building the one and only, and no one is at this point, right? Certainly not, an agent built into an existing piece of software. No human only uses one piece of software to do their job. So I don't know how you could expect any agent to only use one piece of software to do their job. And so, that little conversation is a little bit dicier. And the platform folks, we run our company on platform X, and therefore we'll use their AI management. Well, okay, except when you want, when your competitor is using this other AI over here that isn't compatible with that, and that's a problem, right? So, I think a lot of companies are trying to portray themselves as the only AI you'll ever need, and I don't think that any company will ever be that, but certainly no company is that today. When I go to our customers and talk to them, I'm not really speaking truth to power. I'm basically saying, look, you have a desire to make this happen. You recognize this is super important for your company, for your job, for your competitive positioning, and you are unhappy with the productivity you're getting from AI so far. And I know very few CEOs who will say, I am really happy with our AI productivity so far, right? I know one, but he's an unusual person running an unusual company, and he's thrilled, and we should all be like him. But but the rest of them are not very happy at all. And so, the other folks who we probably irritate a bit are the tinkerers who want to, I'm going to download this thing and do this thing, and I'm going to sort of run everything through me, so I'm important. And those folks don't necessarily like to relinquish power, but we lived through that before. The other thing we lived through during the API time was, of course, the cloud revolution. And you'll recall that when Nashry started in 2006, my previous company, I had to raise $4 million before I wrote a line of code. $1 million went to Sun for 2 servers. $1 million went to Cisco for 2 routers. I had to get a cage. I had to buy a bunch of Oracle software. All of that stuff's free now, right? And so during that transition, I remember speaking at a conference at Interop, the conference for the big, data center buyers, right? And I was on the cloud panel because we were one of the first companies that deployed in the cloud. And the basic point of the cloud panel, so nostalgic there was such a thing, was we got up there and all these dinosaurs in the room were saying all the reasons why we were wrong and the cloud would never survive. And I'm like, look, we're in Vegas at Interop, and you're talking to me. Your CEO is at a much better conference in Hawaii, and she's learning that you can have data centers with no CapEx. Who's going to win that argument? Like, you guys are out of your minds if you think this isn't going to work. And further, I'm sure you guys are all super smart, but I know Amazon is better at running data centers than you are. And so, this evolution is going to happen. The smart CEOs get it. And they just want to see it happen. They want to see it happen now. I want to see it happen now. I'm not happy with the level of AI in my company. I've got 22 people, all of whom know about using AI.
Right.
So, I want more.
I want more. That could be, I think, the theme of the era right now. I want to go back and tug a little bit more on a topic that we started exploring earlier in terms of the visibility of what your platform enables. And I'm interested in what patterns have you seen in the data, or what patterns maybe have your customers seen that surprised them? Things happening with their agents that they didn't expect, or something else. I don't know what. Has there been anything surprising?
Well, I think the big surprise that everybody has to have with AI in general, and it's just amplified when it's agentic and it's taking actions, is when it does things that are completely counter to what you tell it to do, right? And you say to it, why did you do this? This is not what I said. And of course, it's always very apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Right? And that, the concept of how you ask for what you want really, really matters. And that I would say that and by the way, it's also not consistent. You can have the same, I can say, go do this thing in Salesforce that it did yesterday, and today it says I don't have access to Salesforce. I'm like, well, you had it 10 minutes ago. Oh my goodness, yes I do. So I think a lot of it is still, it is this incredibly powerful technology that often just seems kind of stupid, and that you have to understand that. I'll go back to the cloud thing. When we were, as I said, we were one of the first companies using EC2 that we bet the farm on it. We were like, we're all in. People are like, how can you manage something where you're not the ones controlling the actual computers? And I said, well, the traditional data center management is you have these computers running, and then you have things you do when they go down, and you fix them. And we decided to turn that on its head and say, we need to manage in such a way as we assume they'll often be down, and understand how to always be up, even if they weren't, and figure out what that looked like. And we built a bunch of tools around that are now standard stuff. But the mentality is, how do you leverage that uncertainty, and how do you exist in it and still get the kind of return that you want? And it's a lot of experimentation and a lot of accepting that there will be the occasional bad outcome, as there are with humans. Humans do stupid stuff too. And that if you can mitigate the risks and manage the downside, if you can put guardrails up that make it so that when it doesn't do the thing you thought it was going to do, that's not the end of the world. And then you figure out how to make it do what you want.
You raised a number of important points there, one of which I think is risk appetite. And the larger the organization, the less willing they are to take risks in general. Are you seeing that mentality or that mindset shift at all, given the rapid rise of AI and the need to start to take risks and take more of a bottom-up approach in many instances?
Yeah, I did. I was at a conference, a big major company CIO conference recently, and they had one of these things on stage where they asked this question. You could respond in an app in real time. And it was, with AI, do you want to be fast and risky or slow and careful? And these CIOs in the room were like 60-40 fast and take risks. Okay? Which, okay, great, good. But it also depends on the kind of company, right? So these financial service companies we're dealing with, where they're insisting on us deploying in private cloud, and they're very, 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 very careful, but also recognize that they are competing with people who aren't, and they have to manage that risk. And then there are companies that are really trying to say, how do we mitigate this risk? So one company I talked to, a big e-commerce, big retailer, in person, bricks and mortar and e-commerce retailer, And they have a particular category of product that has a lot of defects. The defects arise when people bring the product home and install it. And so they created an agent that has the ability, when the customer service folks reach a particular thing with someone who calls them or who chats with them or who comes in through the agent, that if it's this category of product, it's under $200, and they're saying certain things that make it likely that the product has failed, that this agent will automatically order and drop ship a replacement. But they've put guardrails around it where they say, I know I'm taking some risks. I'm going to give away some widgets I shouldn't have. Someone's going to figure out how to take advantage of this. But on the other hand, I'm saving a bunch of money from people, going through a bunch of machinations before they do the inevitable, and that's order the thing to replace this thing, right? And if the risk is greater than, if the dollar cost of the bad outcomes is lower than the money saved by the good outcomes, and you get customers who are happy because they get instant service, it's a win. And I think that a lot of technology and automation falls into that. You're never going to have no bad outcomes, but you have to manage the risk and manage the downside. And if you can, you're going to succeed and take advantage of the folks who are too risk averse.
Yeah. I think that's a very fair assessment. And talking about money and risk, so our audience is predominantly middle market companies that don't have the resources of a Fortune 500, but they've got the same challenges, quite frankly, especially, What do you suggest as an approach for these organizations in terms of implementing agent governance? Some of the things that we've been talking about today, what are exploratory steps that they should be taking right now if, say, I'm not, again, resourced like a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, no, and we have plans for teams that start at $500 a month and are designed
perfect
for SMBs, right? So we're there, right there. We're right there with you.
That's good.
The good thing about programs like that, whether it's ours or software in general, is you want to have the level of security and management afforded to the enterprises. You just don't need a bunch of the bells and whistles they do, right? And so you look for that. But I think the other thing is that the best thing you can do is talk to folks who are doing this, that are your peers. And we go, the thing that all of my team is laser focused on, and I remind them about this all the time, is this is so early. Agentic ROI is like not much of a thing right now, right?
No.
And so we as technologists, we as humans are pattern matchers. And so the more things we can go out and say, here is this little use case that someone's using to actually have positive ROI on and are really getting something out of this agent, the more you can surface those things and hear about how they were done, you then can pattern match. Say, well, I don't have that problem, but that sounds a lot like this thing I do have. And if they could solve it with that way, this might give me some insight as to how to go do it. And so I would encourage people to talk to folks, even outside their businesses and other kinds of companies. Whenever you're at the some event where you're talking to your peers, just bring this up and say, how are you making AI happen? This is actually one of the great icebreakers that some of the dinners I attend that this one organization uses. And they go around the room and they say, other than coding copilots and customer service chatbots, what is the most productive way you're using AI in your company? And I've heard some really interesting things there. And it's through those that the rest of the people in the room go, I hadn't thought of trying to use it for that. That's a really good, because at this point, it's all new.
Right. It is. And I think you are spot on in your analysis and your remarks about this being early days, and we really don't understand yet where this is all going. Yet, you clearly have had the insight that we're going to need some different types of infrastructure to make all this work. And I'm thinking back to a conversation I had much earlier in 2025 with Poppy Manon from Outshift by Cisco. And they are thinking very much about what they're calling the Internet of Agents and what is going to be required, right, in terms of infrastructure and whether our current Internet infrastructure and networking infrastructure is capable of withstanding that. So all that word salad out there. What else are you seeing in the landscape that, much like you're reevaluating this particular component for AI, what else are you seeing out there that you think we need to really be taking a hard look at and saying, I'm not sure this is going to serve us well going forward?
AI specific, I would say, I actually don't believe that the chat interface survives as the dominant way for enterprise at least, to deal with AI. Because again, it's not how we ordinarily do our jobs, right? We don't tend to chat. There's a whole reason why, you could say user interface folks exist because computers are hard to deal with, and so it simplifies that so we humans can do it. Okay, fine. But over time, we've found more efficient ways to give instructions and to get information back. And I think the chat interface, again, it's a combination of, it's a great way to get your code fixed, which is why engineers like it. And it's sort of an extension of how we interact with search engines and other things, where we're now able to ask questions and get answers or suggestions. But asking questions and getting answers or suggestions is either none or a very small part of most people's jobs. It is more of what they do for leisure and recreation. That's great. So chat interfaces are great there. But I think that we will do well to figure out what the user interface and the interaction modality is of people interacting with agents and agents interacting with underlying services in a way that makes sense given the strengths and weaknesses of this technology. But my guess is it's not going to be the chat interface.
I think that's a fairly good prediction, and I'm interested to see where all this goes, because I don't feel like we've really had what I would call an iPhone moment yet with AI in terms. Yeah. No.
And for me, the iPhone moment was the first time I've slipped my thumb to unlock it. I'm like, okay, this is just totally different. But it's also, every technology is like that. So I'm a theater buff. I love going to theater. The initial movies, the first movies, where they put a camera in the middle of the theater and they showed what was on stage, which is fine. But, it solved the problem. If you couldn't be there, you could at least see it. Great. But that's not movies. Charlie Chaplin came along and said, well, wait, what if I put a camera here and another one over here and a third one there, and then I edit that together, and that became movies, right? And so I think that, when we had the same thing with, CD-ROMs were initially, they were kind of janky, and then they got better, and internet applications were initially like CD-ROMs, and then they got better, and we added more, and, all of these things evolve when really, really creative people see the world as it is. They see this new technology, they see the problems that exist, and they go, if I have this and this and this, I can do that thing over there that no one's thought of, but is going to make a huge difference. And it's those use cases where a lot of those we're waiting for at this point.
I'm so glad that you gave that example about early cinema, right? Setting up the camera in the theater. One of the examples I often give in workshops or talks is the early electrification of factories. You'll have a steam-powered factory, but then we're just stringing lights in it, right? And it's the same thing with what you're speaking of. We don't have those use cases. We haven't figured it out yet, and it's impossibly exciting. And for folks that aren't thinking about it the way that you are, any of our listeners, I really encourage you to lean into that idea, because we are at the very nascent stage of this technology from where I'm sitting, and we don't quite know what that killer app is going to be, what that iPhone moment is going to be, what it's going to look like. But that's why we got great people like you inventing really cool technology to help us along the way.
Yeah, it's fun to be part of it, but I can't wait to see what people do with it. That's the really fun part.
Me too. Speaking of inventing technology, I believe Barndoor is coming up on its first anniversary. Is that correct?
We are technically, we were incorporated a year ago, 2 days ago.
Oh, right.
And,
happy birthday.
We had to incorporate before we, were able to accept money from investors.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, they have to wire it somewhere, and to have a bank account, you have to have a company. So we're basically, depending on when you count the first anniversary, we're basically there, and a lot has happened, not just in our little company, but in the world in AI, and it is moving at a pretty steady clip. We talked about MCP. MCP is less than a year old and has undergone so many transformations so far that part of our job is to manage that and deal with that on behalf of our customers. They don't have to. I have two people whose full-time job is just basically paying attention to what's happening in MCP, because it's just, there's all kinds of wacky things going on with it.
Well, and I would imagine, in addition to the typical pressure cooker of a startup and the intensity of the first year, you're layering on the rapid development and iteration of all the AI technology. Plus, you're out there in the field working with customers, early customers. What have you learned that you didn't expect when you started? I mean, I know you founded a company before, you, quote, been down this road before, but this is a uniquely different road you're traveling now.
It is. I think the biggest surprise so far has been the level to which really, really sophisticated and large companies are jumping in very early. And, the API thing we went through was sort of a proxy for the mobile revolution. But even that, the concept of, every company needs a mobile app and a mobile strategy took a lot longer to happen. And, and we would have to educate people. We go, large hotel chain X, and they want to have, the ability to book a hotel room on an app. And I was like, well, what's that going to talk to? They're like, I don't know. I said, well, it's this thing called an API. This is why you need us, right? And you now have mandates in banks and financial services companies to make this stuff happen in a very secure way from day one. And several of our first enterprise customers are folks who have very, very deep security, have to be private cloud or on premise, that we have to deal with deployment issues that weren't something that we had to deal with for years back before. And that's just been really interesting to see the level of speed and enthusiasm that this is getting implemented with.
That's cool. We're recording this episode in mid-October. It's going to air probably late November. I know that you've got some stuff cooking. Is there anything that you can share with us or talk about?
By the time this reaches the light of day, we should have released the ability to. MCP is a funny thing. There's lots and lots of different servers out there. Some of them are in and of themselves unsecure. Many of them don't really have much capability. They sort of limit the things you can do to things that could not possibly cause problems, but also could not possibly be productive. And so we have had a lot of demand from folks saying, help me just get connected to my various systems, just as an individual, an individual user. And that is being launched prior to the end of November when this will. So if you come and see us by the time this is launched, because it's the last bits of it are in the current sprint. So I'm not at all concerned that it will get out there. As well as we're working on, and if it hasn't been launched yet, which I hope it is, it will be launched shortly after this airs, the ability for even enterprises to come and self-serve, just set up the system on their own, take it for a run, do some stuff with it, and see what they can play with, so that they don't, engineers don't like talking to salespeople. Go figure. So we're going to make it possible for our platform to be test driven by anybody who wants to play with it.
Very exciting. Very exciting. All right, let me ask you one more hardball question here. You're working with a lot of leaders. You're working with a lot of CEOs. If you were a middle market CEO today, not a Barndoor, which you are, but if you were a different middle market CEO today, what is the one thing that you do differently than you're seeing most companies do with their AI strategies? Is there a zig when everybody is zagging that you would encourage folks to think about making?
Obviously some folks are doing it really well, right? So I wouldn't say that everyone is screwing it up, but I will say that there's there's a gap between this concept of we all know AI is important and actually execution and making it happen. And I think that a lot of companies are so there's two things. One is that a lot of companies have bought into this myth that, Joe over in finance, you give him access to Claude and suddenly he's going to figure out the way to automate his job away. We've had low code, no code things for a long time. We've had no shortage of tools that purport to make it possible for non-technical people to make computers do technical jobs. But fundamentally, the folks in those jobs aren't usually the ones who think the way computers do and understand how to apply these tools to solve those problems. And I think that a lot of mid-market and large company CEOs feel like I'm buying this platform, I'm putting it out there, people should figure out how to use it. And it still is the case that there's a group of people that are particularly good at understanding and dissecting business challenges, looking at the available tools and implementing those tools. And sometimes they're consultants and sometimes they're people in your organization, right? But there are folks whose task it is to sort of go through. We used to run these hackathons, and we kind of do a similar thing now with AI. It's like, get the people in the room, talk about it, and have someone, we have people on our team who do this, someone who is really good at using AI to solve problems, try to understand your problems and teach you how to solve them, rather than assuming it's just going to sort of happen on its own, because it doesn't generally happen on its own. And the other version of this is you have, the senior executive who's a year from retirement, and you're like, you run the innovation team and make AI happen. And that's not necessarily the best casting for that. You really, I look at how some of our younger team members make use of AI, and I'm really impressed, right? This is a generation that is pretty native on it. I encourage them to teach the rest of us what we should be doing.
I can't think of a better parting thought than that. Learning from the younger generation. So, Oren, an hour goes by so quickly on this show.
So much fun.
I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Likewise.
And I thought that this was a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with beyond that mic drop of learning from the youth?
I would plug my latest Broadway show, but I won't do that here.
Oh no, plug away! What is the latest Broadway show?
So we are opening Queen of Versailles on Broadway.
Fantastic.
Starring Kristen Chenoweth, who is in the original cast of Wicked, written by Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked. It's his first new musical in 25 years.
Wow.
And it will be open. Actually, performances started this week, so by the time this airs, it will have been open on Broadway, and you should definitely come see it. If you see one show on Broadway, you want to see Kristen Chenoweth perform this music. It's incredible.
Fantastic. I can almost guarantee that my daughter will be on the next train to New York.
Excellent.
She loves the live Broadway theater up there. So that sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's good.
You bet.
People that want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to help you back your next show. Maybe they just want to learn more about Barndoor.
I'm Oren at barndoor.ai. Easiest way to reach me.
Okay, that's fair enough. So I appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. This was just wonderful.
Thanks so much, Chad. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Our listeners, once again, we've come to the end of yet another episode of AI for the C-Suite. So thank you for tuning in. We are committed to helping middle market leaders thrive during the exponential age. And if you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our site, aiforthecsuite.com. Please join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization. And until then, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Thanks, everybody.